Celebrate over 100 years of steak perfection during the Omaha Steaks Anniversary Sale. Save 50% site-wide on USDA certified tender steaks and more. Plus, get an extra $35 off with code CERTIFIED at omahasteaks.com today. Don't wait. Shop the anniversary sale at omahasteaks.com to save 50% on legendary steaks and more. Plus, get an extra $35 off with code CERTIFIED. Minimum purchase may apply. See site for details.
Finding great candidates to hire can be like, well, trying to find a needle in a haystack. Sure, you can post your job to some job board, but then all you can do is hope the right person comes along. Which is why you should try ZipRecruiter for free at ziprecruiter.com/zip. ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you. It finds them for you. Its powerful technology identifies people with the right experience and actively invites them to apply to your job. You get qualified candidates fast. So while other companies might deliver a lot of hay, ZipRecruiter finds you what you're looking for. The needle in the haystack.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free at ziprecruiter.com/zip. That's ziprecruiter.com/zip. ziprecruiter.com/zip.
Hey, warmer for the low! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined in a few minutes by a true wealth of knowledge when it comes to college basketball. Rocco Miller, he does such great work over at Bracketeer.org. We're going to be chatting with him about some of the mid-majors that we've got in the northeast part of the country, a few teams that he feels like are going a little bit under the radar. We've also got a lot of conference realignment. Teams that are in their final season with regards to their current conference, so we're going to be addressing that issue. We're going to be taking a look at some of these teams that deserve a little bit of shine. I'm going to talk quite a bit about the Atlantic 10 landscape as well. So we're going to have a great chat with Rocco. He has joined me all throughout the offseason, and he's just so good at being able to break down this great game of college basketball. So very much looking forward to that. Now that we've got all the transfer portal news taken care of and things of that nature, it's a lot of two-part conversations, and be on the lookout the next few days for a few conference previews. Going to do the NBC and the Ohio Valley Conference, most likely within the next 72 hours. So that's something that you're able to look forward to. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GUNet_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast by that 5-star review. If you have any Twitter/X questions, please do fire those in, because I want to get you guys set for the upcoming season. Did not get in any today, but everything is powered by EdgeBoost. EdgeBoost is making sure that bettors are able to have access to their funds whenever and wherever, that 100% of gambling transactions all do get approved. And when you go to EdgeBoost.bet, put in that promo code of Greg, Greg. That'll get you a dollar for dollar match on your first deposit up to $25. Now let's chat with our good friend Rocco Miller. He does such a tremendous job over at Bracketeer.org. Additionally, I know that he's doing some tremendous work with the new Trilly Donovan website as well, so he'll tell us a little bit about that at the end. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at his first and last name, Rocco Miller, and then the number 8 altogether. And Rocco, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Always a pleasure to be on with you, Greg. With football starting in like 2 weeks, I think basketball is just going to sneak up on everybody by November. So we've got to get our ducks in a row. Any big announcements should be done before college football, I think. We'll see if we get any more realignment news. We saw Tennessee Tech, Greg, join the SoCon starting next July. I think there's going to be even bigger news sooner than later. So, yeah, still lots to look forward to as the offseason comes to a close.
Yep, and I'm glad that you do mention that, because obviously with the Tennessee Tech situation, they're still going to be out there in the OVC for this season. It's a little bit too late in the game to try to rearrange things for this year, though Grand Canyon, that was pretty late in the situation as well. So, I mean, that sometimes happens. But how do you take a look at some of these teams that they might be in the last year of their respective conference? Because we've got a lot of that with the Mountain West teams going on over to the Pac-12. You just mentioned it with Tennessee Tech. And sometimes I feel like these teams are in precarious situations. And sometimes you see a one-off situation where Louisville, in their lone year in the American, actually won the national championship.
It's a crazy situation. You know, some of these leagues are at the mercy of football. SoCon's certainly a basketball-driven league. So we have a mix of both. And I think just based on college sports as a whole, moving towards it being obviously it's always been for profit as a business, but now needing to find new ways to bring in revenue, new ways to approach league membership, and obviously, different programs are more invested than others. The ones who are willing to invest can certainly make a jump forward. I imagine that's what happened with Tennessee Tech. That one I think caught me and others off guard due to the fact that they haven't been that great on the field or on the court. They do have a football element, I believe, but I think this just shows where Tennessee Tech's at as a program, ready to move up in basketball, really invest. I think that maybe they'll carry over to other sports like baseball and softball. It is all case by case, and I do think leagues are also in survival mode. I've met with a lot of them this offseason, and it's really what it's always been. You got to eat or you're going to be eaten. And we saw, unfortunately, the WAC, just 2 years removed from probably their best basketball season in years. Now, pretty much in a year from now, it won't exist in its same capacity. It'd be called the United Conference with only a handful of teams out of Texas still remaining. And so that's just the world we're in. And now I think the biggest news here in the West is what happens with the WCC. We know Gonzaga's going to the Pac-12. We know St. Mary's is heavily involved with trying to get into the Pac-12. And I do think for the Pac-12's sake, that would just seal the deal on an unbelievable basketball conference. So we'll see if that domino falls at some point in the coming months. But then from there, what's the WCC left with? I know they're continuing to try to grow and expand to hold the league together. Some recent rumors of St. Thomas, Denver, perhaps some others from closer to the West coming in. You still have very invested programs with San Francisco and Santa Clara, who might be the future flagship schools of the league. So there's just so much going on, all the different levels. Of course, you have down the road, your backyard school, UNLV. Are they going to stay in the Mountain West long term? I think their goal is to eventually be in the Big 12. And football is really invested, so that is actually a possibility for them. You hear like St. Thomas, for example. I think the WCC would love to have them. I'm writing an article on them next week. They could end up in the Atlantic 10. Someday they could land in the Big East because there's only 2 Division I schools in Minnesota. So that's just a handful of the ones that pop off the top of my mind. There's so much to pay attention to. We're at a period now where really nothing can surprise you that much.
Yep, no question about it. And like I said, I think that everything should be set for this year, but hey, with Grand Canyon, that popped up in late June, early July. So you just never know when some of those situations are going to be arising, as we do have Rocco Miller, does great work over at Bracketeer.org, joining me right here on Cusco Hoops. And one of those mid-major conferences that has experienced quite a bit of realignment over the last few years is the Atlantic 10. Now, not too much this offseason. They did lose UMass to the MAC. Obviously, that was a football-related situation with UMass trying to get into more of a football-related conference where you just don't have that with a lot of these Atlantic 10 schools. And if you do, it's at the more FCS level. But that said, how do you take a look at this Atlantic 10 coming into the season? Because obviously there's the Power 5 conferences, and then I would put the American and the Mountain West as those next best conferences coming into the season, with obviously the WCC having Gonzaga as well.
I'm encouraged by the Atlantic 10 from top to bottom because one of the ways I think to approach the strength of a league is by how good their floor is. And the A10, seldom occasions has been able to get everybody into the top 200, for example. Last year was a brutal year, mainly because you had UMass finish at 222. They're now gone. So we're down to a 14-team league now. But you also had LaSalle 229, a really historically rough year for Richmond at 247, and of course Fordham, who had a change at 237. Now we enter this year, and we got a bunch of teams stuck in the hundreds as well. On top of that, only 4 teams in the top 85, and that's just not going to get it done for a multi-bid A10. We didn't have to go through the excruciating selection Sunday for VCU because they did survive the George Mason showdown in the A10 championship game. And that sets the stage for this year. UMass being gone, 14 teams coming back. You have Fordham, first of all, hiring one of my favorite coaches, I think one of yours as well, and Mike Magpio just runs the Kyle Smith Hustle Stats system. They've always overachieved at Riverside, 5 great years there. And I've almost just penciled them in just because I know they're going to improve so much as the year goes on. I'm actually impressed with some of the pieces he brought in from the portal. Torvik's got them projected 150, but I just know how competitive he will have them playing night in and night out. And I do think they'll somehow crack the top 7. Don't ask me how, But before I even fill out my A10 preseason poll, I've just got Fordham right there locked in at number 7 because I just trust him so much and that staff to finish in the top half of the league. Now, I think you go to the regular kind of pecking order, it gets really difficult. I think when it comes down to who of these teams are going to be committed to the defensive end. I think that's what's, and it sounds so cliche, but I think that there's a lot to like about a lot of these offenses, whether you look at certainly St. Louis, who will have the most dangerous offense in with Avila back and Paulo Tenio potentially in the middle next to him, just a force on rebounds, a force defensively, shooters all over the floor, a great transfer class. We know the shirt system will produce offense. Now it comes down to how many stops will SLU get. Then you have a George Washington team who has a lot back, and they did great in the portal. A couple of those guys can bring it when it comes to the defensive end, whether you're looking at Tyrone Marshall coming over from Western Kentucky. I also am very encouraged by Boo Boo Benjamin. I think that's a guy that not a lot of people know about because not a lot of people watch the WAC. But at Tarleton, you could argue he was their best defender. And I think he's going to bring a ton of energy to this George Washington roster and potentially help lead them to the league's best defense. And Marshall played great defense as well at WKU. Those are the two guys I think that could maybe make the biggest splash. We know GW's got enough offense to be a top 60 team. They're projected 59th. VCU's the defending champs. And at Bryant, where Phil Martelli Jr. led Bryant to the NCAA tournament last year, they did have the top defense in the Atlantic 10. And so can they carry that forward? They also have a terrific transfer class. And George Mason, I think they built the reputation already. Now they've got to do it with a few new pieces. I think bringing in, namely, Dola Adebayo from Mount St. Mary's, just a freak athlete, got Mount St. Mary's a big part of that run, got them a lot of energy both on offense and defense. Can he be a catalyst and an individual stopper for the Patriots? So all those teams have a lot going for them. I didn't even touch on Loyola Chicago, who has a lot and also a potential to be the best defense in the league. Dayton, who's got the biggest budget in the league, obviously a lot of talent. They just got to figure their pieces out. So, man, I think out of all those teams, and then you add Richmond and St. Bonaventure. Richmond did really well in the portal. Bonaventure with Woj there, they've got some pieces as well. I think the A10 is really, really deep, if you can tell by that quick summary.
Absolutely, and I'm so glad that you mentioned Dayton there at the end as well, because I felt like they were one of the bigger underachievers out there among mid-major teams in college basketball last year, because when you bring in Zed Key, when you bring in Posh Alexander, guys that started at the Power Conference level, and they just honestly did not live up to their billing last year, that was a little bit discouraging. And this offseason, I think that you would agree with me, Dayton didn't bring in quite as big of names as they did this last offseason, but how much might that actually be a little bit of a good thing? Because I look at that for a more high-level basketball element as well with Kansas, because we know that they've brought in some name guys in the past. It didn't work out for them. And this offseason, they've brought in a few more mid-major guys. And I think that there are a lot of schools figuring out, all right, just because we bring in a name doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be success. And I think that teams like Dayton, teams like Kansas, they're looking a little bit more at the fit rather than the name, unlike a few years ago.
Yeah, Dayton will be really interesting because, Javon Bennett showed he could score at this level, but he's very undersized at 5'10". He's an offensive maestro. He's also a steal and a half per game per night guy. And so you like that glue in the backcourt with Emile Letang coming back as the 7-1 rim protector, super raw as a freshman, but demonstrated by getting at least a block shot on average per night. He's a really key cornerstone to the Dayton defense. And then, of course, we know all about Keontae Jones from CSUN. I think he actually will have a role that maybe allows him to score more than 15, 16, 17 points a night. He also will really help rebounding the ball. He's a great passer and should be a high major player. So if Dayton has a great year, Keontae Jones has a chance to be the A10 player of the year, which is crazy for a guy that, just came from Northridge. But that's how Northridge had it rolling last year. He's a tremendous athlete. Jordan Durkat comes over from Rutgers. He was the freshman of the year at Merrimack back in the NEC a couple of years ago. I got to cover him. He's a good mid-major player. Should be much more effective at the A10. Maybe it is still a level too high. I'll be very curious to see how Durkat delivers in the Dayton system, but they've got some insurance policies. Bryce Hurd came over from NC State, didn't get to play a whole lot, certainly extremely talented. And Malcolm Thomas was a redshirt but a 3-star recruit at Villanova. He brings in a nice 6'8" frame. We don't know a lot about him yet at the collegiate level. Obviously, if he was good enough for Villanova to recruit originally, that there's some upside there. So Dayton's just a really tough team to project for all those reasons. I didn't even mention Deshane Montgomery, who did get some run at Georgia last year, averaging over 6 a game in the SEC. So he's certainly a player they're also going to count on at 6'4". So I can see all the offensive philosophy behind Dayton. Of course, we know Leah Tang's a guy they can count on to rim protect, but he's certainly not going to be a guy that plays more than 20 minutes a night. So how are these other guys going to share into that defense? I really feel like both the A10 regular season and, of course, the A10 tournament will go to a team with the top 3 defense in the league.
Yep, I'm right there with you. Defense does certainly win championships out there in the Atlantic 10, just as Duquesne 2 years ago, what they were able to do, especially with them winning a game in the NCAA tournament, as Rocco Miller, who does such great work over at Bracketeer.org, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And we've gotten some great insights from Rocco about the Atlantic 10. Well, I know that we've talked a little bit about realignment. Let's open it up on the flip side. Let's just get some of the teams that Rocco Miller is very high on that he thinks are being a little bit undervalued from the mid-major ranks. We'll talk about that with Rocco on the flip side right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast.
Warning, the following ZipRecruiter radio spot you are about to hear is going to be filled with F-words.
When you're hiring, we at ZipRecruiter know you can feel frustrated, forlorn even, like your efforts are futile, and you can spend a fortune trying to find fabulous people, only to get flooded with candidates who are just fine. Fortunately, ZipRecruiter figured out how to fix all that. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/zip. With ZipRecruiter, you can forget your frustrations because we find the right people for your roles fast, which is our absolute favorite F word. In fact, 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day.
Fantastic.
So, whether you need to hire 4, 40, or 400 people, get ready to meet first-rate talent. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/zip to try ZipRecruiter for free. Don't forget, that's ZipRecruiter.com/zip. Finally, that's ZipRecruiter.com/zip.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Great to be rejoined by Rocco Miller. He does such great work over at Bracketeer.org. I know that he's very hard at work getting set for what is going to be a tremendous college basketball season. He does great work over at Bracketeer.org, and you're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at his first and last name, Rocco Miller, the number 8 all together. We've talked the last few minutes about the Atlantic 10, and let's just open it up. Just any sort of mid-majors that you're looking at in terms of teams that you feel like are a little bit undervalued. Because you mentioned Mike Magpio, allowing Fordham a little bit earlier. I am right there with you. I think that team is going to be rock solid. Expectations aren't high for them, but I think that they're going to be able to blossom. Are there a few other teams out there, whether they're in the Atlantic 10, whether they're out there in the West Coast, East Coast, doesn't matter. Just a few teams in general that you're looking at the lower level that you feel like people are sleeping on right now?
I think the Ivy League will be tremendous. And, a team that has historically under Tommy Amaker not been able to get over the hump. They did a couple times early in his tenure there at Harvard, but lately since the league's gotten better, they've been stuck missing most years the Ivy Madness format where the top 4 get to Ivy Madness. But this year with, Robert Hinton was by far the best freshman in the Ivy League last year. He's only a sophomore. You could easily argue he's a high major player. And he averaged 14 points a game as a freshman, shoots it fairly well at 36% from deep, and he's also a decent rebounder. Just him alone coming back as a sophomore, but he's got his sidekick, Austin Hunt, who's also just a sophomore. And Chandler Page is still there as a senior. He averaged 13 a night, and Thomas Baddies, the second at 6'7", averaged over almost 33 minutes a game. They have so much experience. You would imagine, and we've seen this happen, like regardless of program level, if you have that much glue back, Greg, there's certainly no excuse for Harvard to miss Ivy Madness this year. But if they really, really click and play through Hinton the right way and get their schemes figured out, they could be one of the best mid-majors in the country. So I'm curious to see how, Amaker can handle that. And nothing against him personally, but I do think, James Jones has earned the respect throughout the conference as the most consistent winner. Obviously, Coach Henderson at Princeton is really close. If James Jones had Harvard's roster this year, I would be willing to put them probably in the top 75 preseason. But over at Yale, they could still easily win the league because Nick Townsend's back at 15 and a half a game. Casey Simmons coming back as a senior, and a lot of good youth. He brought in 5 new freshmen. I think the one they're most excited about is Courtney Wallace Jr., who projects good enough to be potentially the starting point guard. So always keep your eye on Yale. Always keep your eye on the entire Ivy League. I think the other one maybe that just gets slept on, again, I don't know who everybody's talking about in the mid-major space too much because I'm still busy with scheduling, but if you're sleeping on Towson, that would be a big mistake. The Towson Tigers, of course, are bringing Tyler Tejada, a guy who only got to play about half the season last year, but we saw what Towson did in the CAA when he was healthy. We saw how bad they struggled without Tejada in the non-conference part of the year and just how important he is to winning. Dylan Williamson can play the hero role as well. He shoots over 6 threes a night. He makes 43%. I mean, he's just a deadly shooter. And those percentages are even greater when Tejada is healthy because, of course, that pulls the defense away from Williamson. I loved what I saw for 3 straight nights, even though Towson lost all 3 nights when I called the games in Canada last year from Caleb and Bea. He was a really, really great hustle guy, freshman. Now he'll be a sophomore. He's only listed at 6'9", Greg, but he plays about 6'11", 7 foot. Very long wingspan, just got a knack for rebounding. And I think his numbers will take a nice boost, especially with Suleiman graduating, and that kind of opens up the middle for Mbaya to play a bigger role. I like him in that role. And then they also brought in more Sec from Fresno State, a 7'1" guy that's played some in the Mountain West. Certainly doesn't hurt. So I think Towson, they got a couple other transfers that will really contribute as well. Jack Doumbia, Tyler Schmidt coming over from Wright State and Valparaiso, respectively. This is a Towson team that can go pretty far, maybe even win a game in the NCAAs if they get the right draw. And then I think you go like a step further, and I came prepared to talk about the Northeast, so I'll just stay over there. But you look at the opportunity that Jerry McNamara has at Siena this coming year. There's just from a formula standpoint, there's just so much to build on from that first go around. 4 starters back, and then they plug in Tasman Goodrick, a D2 transfer from Gannon, who averaged 15.6 and 11 rebounds, plus over an assist per game and over a steal per game. It's just a super dynamic 5-man that can spread the floor. They also brought in 6'11" Riley Mulvey. So 2 awesome transfer pieces. Mulvey, backup center over at Iowa in the Big Ten, but certainly learned a lot. And he's a 5th-year, last-year guy. And so combine that with all the returning experience. Gavin Doty figures to have a freshman to sophomore leap as well after a great freshman year. Siena could do some big things. And I think a real deep sleeper in that league, and I'll give Matthew Winnick a little bit of credit for calling them out, is Sacred Heart. Sacred Heart only brought in 2 transfers in Jan Farrell and Deshaun Gittins. They both played significantly at East Carolina and FIU, respectively. And then you have the redshirt seniors in Anquan Hill, Griffin Baruch, and Mekhi Connor all back in the starting lineup. Connor was a guy that thought he could transfer up, ends up staying at Sacred Heart. They have some quality freshman to sophomore leap jumps in their bench still with Gui and Bryant, and a lot of freshmen that have some potential as well. So Sacred Heart could be a really deep sleeper in that league. Obviously, I think Iona under Dan Garrio is the other team to watch. Probably still potentially the pick to win it just by sheer talent. They have transfers, not to list all their names, but they do have transfers from Tulsa, Cincinnati, Colorado State, Wofford. Of course, Luke Jungers came back from the portal when he was going to move up. So they have tons of talent at Iona. Very excited to see the Garrio system. On top of all that, 3 good names there to watch in the Metro Atlantic.
Yep, the Metro Atlantic, I think, is going to be a fun conference. They've fallen on some tough times ever since the NIL era, but I felt like Garrio was a really good hire, and I do think that they're going to be back in full force, and a man that is always at full force, a man that does such a great job all 12 months of the year, looking at this great game of college basketball. That'd be you, Rocco. Let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you, and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
Greg, I appreciate it. Thank you. I'm at Rocco Miller 8 on both X/Twitter and Blue Sky. Feel free to follow for all updates if you're not already. My website, bracketeer.org, just released the Mountain West schedule page. We've been doing non-conference schedule pages throughout the last couple of months. So every Power 5 plus the Mountain West now available in one snapshot for your planning purposes this coming year. We appreciate all the support we've been getting on the website. There's a support button right there at the top. Any donation is super helpful. We have people behind the scenes help him build that stuff out. Over at Basket Under Review, the new platform under Trilly Donovan, written a couple pieces so far. Coming next week will be a highlighted feature on the schools transitioning to D1, somewhat with a new lease on life. There was about 7 of them, led by Queens and St. Thomas, who were just approved to be eligible for the NCAA tournament early in their transition due to the new NCAA governance guidelines. So we have full interviews with Queens head coach Grant Leonard and St. Thomas head coach Johnny Tower. That article should be available on Wednesday of next week. Thanks for all your support there. And then later in the month of August, Sean Paul and I will do our first live show of the mid-major show for Field of 68. And that should be a regular thing as we get into the season. And then once the season starts, that will be every Thursday afternoon. Time still to be announced, but really excited about it. Bracketology show, of course, will be back in January. So those are the main things right now, but always more to come, Greg.
Absolutely. And Rocco, he does such an incredible job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. And every single time he joins me, he makes us all so much smarter. So a big thanks to Rocco for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you hear podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GUNet_81. Keep in mind, Lars name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. We have not taken a break in over 2,100 straight days. So I'll be back with you guys once again tomorrow, and be on the lookout. More conference previews coming, most likely a pair in the next 48 to 72 hours. So be on the lookout there, and I'll be with you guys once again tomorrow. Thank you.
Celebrate over 100 years of steak perfection during the Omaha Steaks Anniversary Sale. Save 50% site-wide on USDA certified tender steaks and more. Plus, get an extra $35 off with code CERTIFIED at omahasteaks.com today. Don't wait. Shop the anniversary sale at omahasteaks.com to save 50% on legendary steaks and more. Plus, get an extra $35 off with code CERTIFIED. Minimum purchase may apply. See site for details.
Finding great candidates to hire can be like, well, trying to find a needle in a haystack. Sure, you can post your job to some job board, but then all you can do is hope the right person comes along. Which is why you should try ZipRecruiter for free at ziprecruiter.com/zip. ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you. It finds them for you. Its powerful technology identifies people with the right experience and actively invites them to apply to your job. You get qualified candidates fast. So while other companies might deliver a lot of hay, ZipRecruiter finds you what you're looking for. The needle in the haystack.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free at ziprecruiter.com/zip. That's ziprecruiter.com/zip. ziprecruiter.com/zip.